Hey guys, welcome to this new video in my Project 2000 series. Today we're going to look at the basic tactics, and if you ask me, I think tactics are the most fun part of chess overall. A tactic is mainly something that has like a forced sequence of moves in which you either checkmate your opponent or in which you are able to win a material and thus win the game. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it right now. Okay guys, for the first section in this video, I wanted to talk to you about the fork, which is one of the most basic tactics in all of chess. And the explanation is also very simple. It is a double attack in which you attack two pieces of the opponent at once, but you either take a piece of higher value or you are able to take one of the two pieces that you attack and the opponent is unable to defend them. So yeah, that is basically it. We have a situation here in front of me right now, and this is a position in which white is to play. And the more familiar you'll get with chess, the more you'll play chess, the more you'll recognize patterns. It's all about pattern recognition. It's about realizing the weak squares, the weak points of a chessboard. That's basically it, the weak pieces. And one of the things that you will notice if you'll get better and if you'll play more chess is that the knights like to fork, which is exactly what they are able to do here. And one of the other things that you'll notice is that often on c7, f7, c2 or f2, the possibility arises in some lines to fork your opponent with a knight. And let's say this queen wasn't here and this bishop wouldn't be here, then it would be a straight fork. And remember that knights move in L shapes, right? So knights move like this. These are all the squares that this knight looks at right now on the opponent's half of the board. And chess is all about a combination of, or the coordination of your pieces is maybe the best way to describe it. Because if you have a square that is attacked multiple times by the same piece, it obviously becomes weaker and weaker. And that's exactly what we have right now. We have a bishop staring at c7, but we also have a knight staring at c7. So both of these pieces are looking at the same square. And besides attacking multiple squares at the same time, it's also about realizing which traits, for example, are good and which aren't. So yeah, like I mentioned here, knight c7 is a fork between the king and the rook. Often a fork happens between the king and another piece, especially when the knight is involved. So a knight forks the king and attacks a piece of higher value at the same time. That's what's going on right now. And here there's one way for black not to lose the rook, but he has to lose the queen in order to do so. And losing the queen is even worse than losing the rook, because losing the queen is worth 9 points. Losing the rook, of course, is worth 5 points. Also, you'll lose a pawn, so actually it's going to be 6 points you'll take from him, but he's going to be able to take back the rook, of course. So yeah, the continuation here would probably be he goes here, and now you take, and now he takes here. And yeah, this is probably the best way to play this. It's now +5 for white in this position, so white's completely winning. Yeah, recap of this puzzle is that the c7, f7, c2 and f2 pawns are often prone to be forked by a knight, especially when the king hasn't moved yet. So the king hasn't castled, king hasn't moved. Now there is a possibility to attack both the rook and the king at the same time. In this particular line, the bishop protects the knight, so he cannot take with the queen. But in some lines, the queen is gone, and there's also there's no bishop, so no queen, no bishop. That would be a similar situation, but a little bit different. Okay, more forks. Yeah, so one of the forks that we see often are knight forks, like I just showed you, which a knight attacks the king, and at the same time, probably usually it attacks a rook, sometimes a bishop, sometimes another piece. I mean, yeah, there's a different variety in possibilities, of course, but the one I just showed you happens more often and is a common pattern in chess. This one is maybe a little bit less common or a little bit less often seen, but it is obviously still a very clear tactic. And the tactic here arises from the fact that the king and the knight are on the same diagonal. One of the things I give children chess lessons, and one of the things that I try to really tell them often is look at undefended pieces on the chessboard. It's very important to realize, okay, if I am on a board, if I look at the board at this specific position here to the left of me, look at the undefended pieces that you can attack. So here you're obviously we're white again, and look at the undefended pieces I can attack. There's a knight which is defended by the queen. There is a queen which is undefended, but yeah, queen often is very difficult to attack. You could play something like rook e1, but he can just move, so you know. But in this particular line, the knight here is just very, very weak. The knight doesn't do anything here. It's weak, it's on the wrong square, it should probably still be defended. You should build up an attack, you shouldn't immediately rush moves like this. And I'm not actually sure if this was the last move of black, but it could be. But yeah, here we have a simple tactic. We are going to attack on f5 with the bishop. We attack the king at the same time as we attack the knight. And you can block, but I mean that loses a rook. Or you could probably even better take here, because the rook is still pinned. You could sidestep. If you sidestep, you simply lose the knight, like I mentioned. It's just a basic tactic. I mean, it arises from the fact, okay, looking at the board, what do I see first? So obviously you probably heard by now, you need to look at checks first, then captures, then attacks, I believe. That's the order. But checks, looking at, searching for checks in a position like this is obviously a very good way to deviate what you need to be playing and how you need to be taking advantage of the weak knight here. So you look for the first check you can see, which is this probably, because it's, I guess, the only check. And then you win a knight. It's a fork. Yeah, that's basically this puzzle. Yeah, if you guys have any questions about this, obviously leave them in the comments, of course. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what you guys think about these puzzles. Okay, this time we are playing with black. It's black's turn right now. White has just moved. And yeah, there's another forking possibility here. And forking is, so if you get more familiar with chess, like I mentioned, you'll hear the term fork a lot more. You'll hear it more and more and more, because it's one of the most seen tactics in chess. And yeah, some terms also overlap. Like I mentioned, double attack, fork, it's a little bit the same, as in yeah, it's a double attack because you attack two pieces at once, but it's also a fork because, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit overlapping in terms of terminology. But okay, in this particular line, black can play the move e5. And forks don't only happen with knights, they don't only happen with bishops, they don't only happen with queens, they happen with pawns as well. Actually, forks I think happen with like almost all pieces on the chessboard. I don't think there's a single piece. Maybe no, even the king can fork. Yeah, even the king can fork. So I mean, well, I mean, yeah, e5. Why e5? Well, it's very simple. The pawn is protected by this pawn, so if you take it, I can just take, and that would be 3 points down and 1 point gained, so that would be pretty bad. But if you do not take, if you move the knight, I take the bishop, and if you move the bishop, I take the knight. So yeah, that's a fork. It means there's no way to prevent any of the pieces from you being lost, and there's also no way to take the pawn that is attacking you. If this pawn wouldn't be here, it wouldn't work, because he could just take this pawn, right? I mean, or the pawn should have been defended by some other piece, you know. But if the pawn here in this exact position wouldn't be here, this would just be a free pawn for white. But yeah, like I mentioned, forks, they happen with pawns as well. So good to be on the lookout for moves like e5. I struggled with that a little bit when I started with chess. Not gonna lie, pawn forks were something that were like a blind spot for me. It took me like a few months until, or at least a decent while, until I really understood how to prevent pawn forks, because you need to be wary that they are also possible. Okay, another puzzle. This one is also very fun. This is a nice, also I would say like uncommon pattern, maybe not super uncommon, but it's not the most obvious fork. It's a little bit harder to see this one. Yeah, so here, the reason why it's maybe harder to see is because in your mind you should also always look at checks and captures first, right? You should always look, okay, what can I capture, or actually, how can I check, and then how can I capture something? That's maybe why this one is a little bit more difficult, because it doesn't include a check and it also doesn't include an immediate capture, but it is still very much a fork. So maybe first, if you look at this, you would look at a move like bishop h3, which is apparently this is immediately bad because probably because he has f5. No, that's not the move actually. Why is this all of a sudden not working anymore? Now I'm actually curious why this doesn't work anymore, by the way, but okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna look at why that didn't work anymore after bishop h3 in a while. But for now, let's see. So maybe you'll look at bishop h3 first because it's a check, but it doesn't really work. It doesn't really do anything. The move here is rook e5, and it's like I mentioned, it's not a capture. It's also not a check, but it is very much a fork. And the reason why it is more difficult to find forks like this is because often in positions like this, it also happens that the pieces you're attacking can defend each other, right? So in this position, they cannot defend each other. The knight has no way to defend the bishop, and the bishop has no way to defend the knight. If, for example, there would be a bishop on f5 on the light squares, it wouldn't be a fork at all, because he could simply go bishop d7 and he would defend the knight, and the bishop is also no longer attacked. So this trick only works if you are certain that both pieces you're attacking aren't able to defend each other. Very important to remember that. And in this particular situation, yeah, there's nothing you can do. You can play something like this, you lose your knight, and yeah, probably something like this should be. Well, I mean, oh, there's actually something hanging here, so yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, like I mentioned, you need to lose either of these pieces. It's a simple fork. Now I'm going back real quickly because I'm very curious to see why it doesn't work anymore now. Now there's knight d4. That's awesome. That's awesome. Chess is such an awesome game, man. The reason why chess is such an awesome game is because now he has a counter tactic. he can fork my king and my rook at the same time, and now I just simply lose. Now I simply lose the rook that I just used. So yeah, this is like an amazing example, because now you have to be, like I mentioned, you have to be certain that this particular trick works. And sometimes it can be very difficult to see that it doesn't work, because here it looks like it still works, but knight d4 is a counter tactic a few moves deep that prevents you from actually taking this piece, because you can't take the piece now. You probably need to go like, I don't know, like here now to stop this. That's probably one of the better moves, or you need to go back here maybe. So yeah, I mean, amazing, right? I mean, a prime example of why this particular tactic, this bishop e or rook e5 tactic, is sometimes very, very difficult, because sometimes they have moves to get themselves out of it, and sometimes there's a counter tactic that prevents you from actually winning that piece. Okay, one more, and then I'm going to the next tactical section. But one more fork here, and I mean, basically this one is relatively easy in comparison to the other ones, but hopefully by now, if you look at this puzzle, you have seen it. If not, no worries, but I will explain it right now. So how do you see tactics like this one? I would probably advise you, okay, once more. It's about checks, captures, and you need to have like a checklist in your mind that you need to go through in order for you to find proper moves, right? And at a certain point, it will become like second nature. It will become logical, or it will become instinctive to you. But in the beginning, you need to have a checklist. You need to know, okay, what do I need to look for? Okay. Checks. Are there any checks in this position? No, there are not. There simply aren't any checks. There's not a single check you can give to the enemy king. He's completely safe. There's not a check. So you go on and you say, okay, can I capture anything? Also, not a lot. Not a lot of captures here. It's a very, very equal position. But there is one capture. There's one important capture here, which is capturing this c5 pawn with your bishop. And if you went through the checklist, you would actually see, okay, this is a capture. And then if you see it's a capture, you will go on and you will think, okay, does it actually do anything besides taking this pawn? Does it actually propose any advantage for me, right? Because not every capture is good. Sometimes a capture can also be bad if you aren't careful. But in this particular line, you would say, okay, well, it's a capture, but it does also do something, right? It does also do something. It attacks both of these rooks at the same time. So it's a fork. It's a fork between two rooks. And whatever he does, if he goes like here, for example, you can just take and take. And now you are you won a rook for a bishop, which is 5 points for 3 points. And you also won a pawn, so it's actually 6 points against 3 points. And that's why the evaluation went from almost equal to 3.91 in favor of white here. Yeah. Yeah, great. I mean, yeah, hopefully you guys understand forks a little bit better now. And yeah, let's go to the next tactic. Okay, guys, the second tactic I wanted to discuss with you today is the pin. And the pin is a tactical maneuver where you have an attacking piece, for example, a bishop, rook, or a queen, which restricts a defending piece from moving, because doing so would expose a more valuable piece behind it. A little bit of a technical description here, of course, but it is actually very simple if you see it in action. And yeah, of course, I have the board set up here next to me as always. And in this particular situation, there's a move that black can play, which pins the queen to the king. And the move is bishop b4. And yeah, tactics, like I mentioned, are one of the most fun parts of chess. They're one of the most important parts of chess, probably the most important part. Because if a tactic arises, it could mean you go from a normal equal position all the way until you are completely winning. This position, if there wasn't bishop b5, it would be completely equal. With bishop b5, bishop b4, bishop b4, it is actually a -5 for black. So yeah. The reason this works, once again, you have a piece, an attacking piece, actually a bishop that pins a piece to a piece that has more value. So you pin the queen to the king. The king is the most valuable part of chess, of course. If this queen would move, it would be a game over. You would call the referee and say, okay, let's give each other a handshake and go with our day, of course. So you cannot move the queen. That's basically how this works. And because you cannot move the queen, you need to probably either move your king or you need to lose your queen. Because you have two options. You can castle, for example, then you lose the queen, of course. And the other option is to take. And because the bishop is defended, you can simply take back with your knight. And yeah, now if you castle, there's even a pawn hanging. So yeah. Yeah, so yeah, this is a basic pin. I mean, this is a pin. This is what a pin is. A pin has a piece, another piece, which exposes a more valuable piece behind it. That's basically how it works. Yeah, often in positions like this, you want to be very careful if you put your queen on the same diagonal as your king. That's the way you should prevent these types of blunders, because you always need to be careful about these types of pins, of course. Okay, another pin. This one is a little bit more complex because it also involves a little bit of a few other moves that can be played. One other thing related to pins that you'll notice is that a pin often happens with a king. It often happens when you put one of your pieces in front of your king. That's something you need to be very wary about, because it can be very difficult to prevent pins, but realizing that if you put any of your pieces in front of your king like this, it is going to be prone to be pinned. So here you can go rook g1, and yeah, like, of course, once again, you cannot move the bishop because that would expose the king to an attack, and yeah, once again, you can call the referee and you know, go about your day. So rook g1 pins the bishop to the king. And if you are a little bit of a smarty pants, you would probably say, what about f5? You know, what about f5? He can simply defend his bishop, right? He can defend the bishop, and now whatever, if black plays something else, he can move his king, and now you cannot take because, of course, the bishop is protected. That would be a logical move and a logical thing from you to say. Very good, if you have been paying attention up until now. However, there's a counter trick. Well, there's another counter trick, which is f3. And yeah, we discussed this. He cannot take because that would mean the king is exposed. So what does he do? If he moves the king, he simply loses the bishop. And yeah, that's going to be a very nice day for you, my friend. So yeah, pins, counter tricks, you know. Yeah, I guess if you look at the position like this, rook g1, you have to always be careful that f5 is not immediately stopping your attack, of course. Well, if this pawn wouldn't be here, white or black would have been fine, you know. There wouldn't have been much trouble. Yeah, so that's good to know. Okay, another pin. Yeah, once again, I'm going to go through these a little bit more quickly because the pattern is relatively the same each time. So once again, we see a piece and a king behind it. That's 9 out of 10 times a pin is with a king behind another piece. You can pin something to the king. And in this particular situation, you can play rook c2, because if he steps away, you can simply take. And if he decides to take, if he decides to take here, it is going to be a queen for a rook. And I mean, we all know that a queen is worth 9 and a rook is worth 5. So that is going to be a good trade for us. And yeah, that is basically it. One of the things, for all of these tactics to work, you have to understand piece value. You need to understand that each piece has a certain value, and that that is important for you to realize that a tactic is possible or not. So that's good to remember. I have a video about that. I think it's the 2nd or 3rd video. So go back in the series if you haven't seen it yet, because it's very important. And yeah. Here's a very nice one, a very nice one also. This is a little bit more complex. Once again, in the examples of forks, I also showed a tactic that's a little bit more complex. This one is also a little bit more complex. The reason this is a little bit more complex is because these types of tactics only work if you are certain that the piece you are pinning is not able to be defended. That's very important. So in this particular line, you can go bishop e4. And if this or this pawn, if either of those two pawns wouldn't have been here, it wouldn't have worked. Because if this pawn wouldn't have been here, he would have rook a6. And if this pawn wouldn't have been here, he would have rook c8, defending the knight, of course. But, however, because both of these pawns block the access from the rook to defend the knight, this works. Because now if he moves the rook, you can take, right? I mean, yeah, that's a basic, but that's a free knight. Actually, the best move here is just to play knight d4 and to lose the rook and to gain a bishop for it. Because 5 minus 3 is 2, and that means you lose 2 points. And if you lose the knight, it would be 3 points. So that is why losing the rook and getting the bishop for it is better than losing the knight completely. Also, this knight is looking at some sort of c2 fork, or not actually a fork, but c2 attack, of course. So yeah, very nice one. Once again, this only works because the knight cannot be defended. It's exactly like the fork, right? The fork where we showed the rook e5 move, I believe it was. It's very important that either of the piece cannot defend the other piece, right? Because that would mean that the tactic doesn't work. And in this particular situation with the pin, it's actually relatively the same. As in, if the attacked pinned piece can be defended by the piece you're trying to take behind it, it isn't a fork. It also wouldn't be a fork if this was a knight or a bishop, because if it were a bishop, the knight would obviously be defended. But let's say this was a knight, then it wouldn't have worked, because you move the knight, I take this knight, you take my bishop, and a bishop and a knight trade is simply a equal trade. So that wouldn't have been advantageous for me. That would be just a trade, right? Okay, one more fork. Yeah, how do you explain this one? Not sure. It basically arises from the fact that the knight and the queen are on the same file. That's actually everything, because my queen is attacking this knight, and these two are on the same file. I can pin the knight to the queen, which means if he moves the knight, I can take a queen, which would be very good for me. So he cannot move the knight, and if he moves the queen, I take the knight, and he cannot defend this knight with any piece. If this pawn wouldn't have been here, let's imagine this pawn wouldn't have been here, rook e3 would save the day. Actually, if this pawn wouldn't have been here, it would be check, and yeah, you can call the arbiter again, but you know, if my king would have been here and this pawn wouldn't have been here, then there would have been rook e3. And that would have been well, counter tactic, I guess, to attack the queen and to defend the knight. And then after moving the queen, this is well protected, and you can move this, and you know. However, in this particular situation, it's not the case. The best move here is apparently knight d4, because, oh wow, that's actually nice, because after rook takes, there's this, and then this, and then this, and this, and you know. So there's a counter tactic to fork the king and the queen, right? But the beautiful part of it is the reason this sequence works for white is because even after losing your own queen, you get the knight back for it, right? So now you are up a knight, and that's why this works. Okay, pins. One more pin. This is a little bit more difficult pin, but also a tactical win, of course, in this position. And the reason this is a little bit more difficult is because it requires actually 2 moves to pin. And apparently that's actually, yeah, okay, that works. But okay, king e6 is still winning as well. Okay, but the reason why this works is because my king is restricting this king from going down. That's the reason why this works. Often in endgames like this, where you have a knight and or the opponent has a knight and you have a rook, you have to be very careful if you are playing with the knight that you don't get pinned, because in this particular situation we can play rook b7, and the reason my king restricts him from coming down forces him to go up, and as soon as he goes up I can go rook b8, and now the king is not in time to stop this c8 knight from being lost. So if you go here, I can take here, something like this, I can take the pawn, I can bring my king, I can checkmate you, and yeah, it's gonna be another day in paradise. So hopefully you guys understand this one. You have to check, force him up, and then you can pin the knight to the king. And yeah, no way to move the knight because that would be checkmate. And you can simply win the knight and win the game. Pins, they're very fun. Try them yourself. And yeah, see you guys in the next section. Okay guys, in the last section of this video, we're going to take a look at the skewer, which is a very familiar tactic if you know the pin, because it's almost the same as a pin. The only difference about a skewer is that the more valuable piece and the less valuable piece are reversed in order. So when it's a pin, you pin the less valuable piece to a more valuable piece. So you pin a rook to a king, a queen to a king, a queen to a rook, etc. In the other way around, you are going to be attacking the more valuable piece, so a king to a rook, for example. In this particular situation, we have a king, which is on the same diagonal as a rook, and we can play bishop b2. Funny part about this position is that it's a draw, because you cannot win with only a bishop. Yeah. However, we attack the king, and behind it is a rook, so king more valuable than a rook. King moves, and we can take the rook, and the game is a draw, right? So yeah, I mean that's it, right? I mean that's a skewer. We're going to look at a few different scenarios, few different examples here. This one is also a skewer, very similar as the last one. We play bishop b2. However, now it's actually funny. You skewer 2 of the same valuable pieces to each other, which is also possible with a skewer. Yeah, so this is the question here is this a pin or a skewer? Because it's like, okay, a skewer is when you pin, or a skewer is when you attack a more valuable piece and behind it is a less valuable piece, and a pin is when you attack a less valuable piece and a more valuable piece is behind it. What do you call it if 2 of the pieces are exactly the same value? I don't know. Well, I mean, whatever, you can go here, we can trade, and now, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the skewer. Any other move here and you would be losing, bishop b2, and it's a draw, so good job on keeping the draw here. Another example, also a skewer. We go rook a8. We are attacking a more valuable piece. Behind it is a less valuable piece. He cannot defend it. If his king would have been on f8, it wouldn't have been a skewer, because he could have gone king g7, and then it's just a simple trade. However, here he's only able to go f7, and now we take. And we're up a rook, and a king against a king is of course a completely won endgame. You can checkmate with a king and a rook against a sole king. So yeah, if you don't know that yet, probably at some point we will discuss it in this series. Yeah, that's a skewer. We're going to look at one more skewer here, or actually 2 more, but this is one of them. This one is bishop e4, and once again skewer, pin. I mean, you attack both of the 2 pieces of the same value. Here, it's very important that there's no pawn on d7, for example. If there would have been a pawn on d7, he would have been able to play c6, and the pawn would defend each other, and then it wouldn't have been a skewer. Now, however, if you play c6, I can just take, because the same position arises. It's not any different. I mean, I just won a pawn as well, so that's a free pawn. I would say thank you. Yeah, if you step away here, you can take, and you've won a piece of 5 points versus a piece of 3 points, and that is obviously a good trade, so we do those, and that is a nice tactic. Okay, one more, also a nice one. Once again, you attack something of greater value to reveal something of lesser value behind it. This is exactly like a pin. The reason this works is because these two pawns are here. If either of these two pawns wouldn't have been here, you would be able to go to either g5 or e7, and you would be able to defend the bishop. However, now there's no way to defend the bishop, so if you go, I don't know, so anywhere. Also, this trick doesn't work if there's a check. So for example, if in some situation here he would be able to check, if this pawn wouldn't have been here, he could have given a check, and that would have immediately lost the game actually if this pawn wouldn't have been here. And yeah, in this particular situation there's no check, there's no way to defend the bishop, so the skewer works. If he goes away, I can simply take, that's a free bishop, and yeah, that's why the best move here is apparently bishop h8. Well, okay, yeah. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You're gonna have to lose the rook anyways. Losing a rook and gaining a bishop for it, once again, you go 5 points up, then 3 points down, so you are gaining 2 points if you're white. However, if you're playing with black, if you would have played something like rook here, for example, you would actually lose 3 full points, which is not as good. Okay, guys, that was the video for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this first section of the tactics in the Project 2000 series. I'm going to cover like 4 or 5 videos about tactics, because there's a lot of tactics and there are a lot of different level of tactics. So the more further down this series will go, the more advanced the videos will be regarding tactics. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Hopefully you understand forks, pins and skewers a little bit better now. And if you have any questions, like I mentioned, leave them down below in the comments, and see you guys in the next video. Bye.